my name is Hassaniza Hanafi and I will now present the facts of the case. This case arises from a land transaction that took place in the year 2003. The plaintiff Eng Siu Lan was looking to purchase a parcel of land in Inanam, Sabah to relocate her automotive workshop. She was introduced to the land through two brokers and was told that the sale and purchase agreement would be prepared by the first defendant, who is John Lee Soon Vui, a lawyer and a partner in the second defendant law firm, Vincent Wong & Co. The land in question was said to be under the power of an attorney given by the registered owner, Wan Datin Jikilin, to a third defendant who purportedly had the authority to sell the land. The power of attorney, however, was undated, unstamped, and later discovered to be a forgery. The plaintiff proceeded with the transaction. On 29 July 2003, she signed the sale and purchase agreement and paid 100,000. Later, under the threat that the deal would be cancelled, she was pressured into paying another amount of money, which is 150,000 ringgit. Importantly, the plaintiff gave specific written instructions to the first defendant to do two things. First thing is to apply the necessary governmental permission to transfer the land, and number two, to lodge the memorandum of transfer at the land office. The first defendant failed to carry out these instructions. Unbeknown to the plaintiff, while still acting as her solicitor, the first and second defendants were also acting for another buyer, a company called NCT Forwarding and Shipping, which was interested in buying the same land. This was a clear conflict of interest and it was not disclosed to the plaintiff. On 14 October 2003, the plaintiff and the third defendant signed a letter of disclaimer allegedly drafted by the first defendant, which purported to release the law firm from all liability in relation to that transaction. Just 17 days later, NCT deposited 50,000 ringgit to the second defendant firm as part of payment for the same land, despite the fact that the plaintiff had already paid the full 600,000 ringgit. In the end, plaintiff never received the land and she had never recovered the 600 ringgit she already paid. The case eventually made its way to the federal court after the plaintiff's claim was dismissed by both High Court and Court of Appeal.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Nurul Ain binti Ali and my metric number is 067685. I will be discussing the court's decision in this case. The High Court and Court of Appeal initially dismissed the plaintiff's claim, but the present appeal to the federal court was allowed with cause. The federal court found that the first and second defendants, as the plaintiff's solicitors, had indeed breached their fiduciary duties. Firstly, the court held that the defendants placed themselves in a conflict of interest by simultaneously representing both the plaintiff and NCT in relation to the same piece of land. They effectively served two masters, which was detrimental to the plaintiff's interests. Secondly, the court found that the defendants deliberately withheld material facts, particularly their involvement with NCT. This deception misled the plaintiff into believing they were working in her best interest, while in reality, their intention was for the land to be sold to NCT. Thirdly, the defendants knew the plaintiff had fully paid for the land and they themselves claimed to have lodged the transfer documents. Their subsequent actions of acting for another buyer and concealing this fact from the plaintiff constitute a clear breach of their duty of care and duty to act in good faith. Fourthly, the court highlighted the defendant's gross negligence in not applying for permission to transfer the land despite knowing it was mandatory. This omission was a deliberate act intended to prevent the land from being transferred to the plaintiff. By withholding this crucial information, the defendants deprived the plaintiff of the ability to make an informed decision before signing the letter of disclaimer. Fifthly, the court ruled that the letter of disclaimer was void. Although voluntarily signed, it was based on non-disclosure of material facts. The defendants also failed to advise the plaintiff to seek independent legal advice before signing it. Finally, the court affirmed that, as the plaintiff's solicitors, the defendants owed her a duty not to injure her by failing to take all necessary steps to effect the land transfer. Their negligence directly caused the plaintiff's loss and they were found in breach of both their contractual and fiduciary duties. That's all from me.
Hi, my name is Nurhazwani binti Zainal. My metric number is 067699. I will be continuing on the legal principle. In the case of Brown against Dunn in 1893, the court held that to my mind, nothing would be more absolutely unjust than not to cross-examine the witnesses upon evidence which they have given, so as to give them notice and to give them an opportunity of explanation and opportunity very often to defend their own character, and not having given them such an opportunity to ask the jury afterwards to disbelieve what they have said, although not one question has been directed either to their credit or to the accuracy of the facts they have deposed to. Next, continuing on the legal principle, in the case of Ng Siu Lan against John Lee San Voi, for the first and the second defendant to act for another interested buyer and hide the fact from the plaintiff was clearly a breach of their duty of care and duty to act in good faith to the plaintiff. Moreover, by deliberately withholding the two material facts from the plaintiff's knowledge, the first and the second defendants were in clear breach of that duty. Silence is not an option. It was indicative of negligence and bad faith on their part. Furthermore, as solicitors acting for the plaintiff in the land transaction, the first and the second defendants owed her a duty not to injure her by failing to do which they had undertaken to do, which was to take all necessary steps to effect transfer of the land to her upon execution of the sale of the purchase agreement.
Next, the full disclosure of material facts. Lawyers have a positive duty to disclose all material facts to their client that may affect their decision making, especially before obtaining any form of release. For example, disclaimer letters. The failure to disclose that they were also acting and had not applied for the transfer permission was found to be misleading and dishonest. Lastly, no reliance on fraudulent disclaimer. The fact that the plaintiff issued the letter of disclaimer voluntarily and with open eyes was of no consequences if material facts which affected or might have affected her decision to issue the letter of disclaimer were knowingly and deliberately withheld from her knowledge. For the court to continue such action by the first and second defendants would be condemned to their wrongful acts.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Safia binti Ismail and my metric number is 067683. Today I will be presenting on the impact of the case of Ng Siu Lan against John Lee Sun Vui and another, and how its judgment has had a lasting effect on the legal profession in Malaysia. Firstly, this case highlights that lawyers have a duty to avoid conflict of interest. In this case, the federal court took a strong stance holding clearly that a solicitor cannot serve two masters, especially when the interests of the two parties conflict. Even if the solicitor's involvement with the second party is only preliminary or minor, it still constitutes a breach if it's not properly disclosed. This judgment has had a significant impact in Malaysian legal practice. It established that lawyers must disclose any potential or perceived conflict to their clients, and clients must be advised to seek independent legal advice, especially before signing any document that waives right or release the lawyer from liability. This ruling has raised the ethical standards for Malaysian legal practitioners and reinforced the importance of transparency and client protection. Secondly, the court in this case held that misrepresentation by silence is a form of ethical misconduct. The federal court described the solicitor's failure to disclose key facts and properly facilitate the transaction as a serious ethical and legal breach. This reinforced two important points where passive non-disclosure is unacceptable when a solicitor has superior knowledge, and a solicitor must actively correct any misunderstanding that a client may have, especially if it's result from the solicitor's own omission. This judgment has significantly influenced legal practice in Malaysia. It emphasized that fiduciary duties must be actively fulfilled, not just passively respected, and the legal profession must be guided not just by technical correctness, but by fairness, integrity, and honesty. That's all from me. Thank you.
A very good day, sir. My name is Ramita Kaur, daughter of Sukhvinder Singh, and my matrix number is 065901. Now I'll continue regarding the impact of the case. So the impact here is enforceability of the letter of disclaimer. The federal court held that a letter of disclaimer signed by a client to absolve solicitors of liability is void if it was signed without the client being informed of the material facts. Even if signed voluntarily, such a document cannot be used as a shield when the solicitor deliberately withholds information that may affect the client's decision in future. So the impact here is this ruling limits the enforceability of disclaimers and stresses the importance of informed consent. Legal practitioners must ensure that clients are made fully aware of all facts before signing such waivers. Next impact is professional negligence and standards of care. The court found that the practitioners failed to exercise the standard of care expected of reasonably competent, convincing lawyers. They did not take reasonable steps to firstly verify the validity of the power of attorney which was forged, second to ensure the registered landlord owner was not bankrupt, third to apply for necessary permission to transfer the land, and fourth, preserve the plaintiff's interest in the land after receiving the full payment. So the impact here is this reinforces the legal principle that solicitors can be held liable for professional negligence even in the absence of direct dishonesty where due diligence is not adequately exercised. The third impact is fiduciary duties of solicitors. The case strongly reaffirmed that solicitors owe a strict fiduciary duty to act with loyalty, honesty, and full disclosure. The federal court held that solicitors must disclose all material facts that could affect the client's decision. A disclaimer or a waiver signed by the client is invalid if obtained without the full disclosure. Fiduciaries cannot benefit from their own wrongdoing even if the client acts voluntarily. So the impact here is this decision evaluates that the standard of fiduciary care in Malaysia where solicitors who act dishonestly or withhold critical facts will be personally liable regardless of any signed release or disclaimers. Thank you.